Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Sandeep. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You're audible.
Good evening and welcome to everybody. Today we will be listening to Mr. Amit Devre on enable accreditation as per ISO 125. And for the users also it is very important because the user also should know what are their rights and what they are what they expect they have to expect from the laboratory. Because in the normal course, when the specifications are drafted, there are now normally a single value or some range. But when the laboratory gives the results, that gives a particular result which should be interpreted as per your suitability, because there is a lot of uncertainty elements involved in the testing also, which Mr. Devare will be dealing with us. So one has to understand the element of uncertainty and take the decision accordingly. Only suppose there is some tensile value is given 415 and if your readings are coming around 410, that doesn't mean that material can be rejected or material can be accepted. So there are always measurement of uncertainty, and I request all the users, specifically ask the laboratories, discuss with them what is their element of uncertainty, which is very important in this case. So with this, I'll take you to the ASM International. We are basically India chapter, located in Mumbai, and our headquarters in Ohio, US. We are having strength of 250 members plus, and with this today's seminar, I expect at least addition of 2-3 members, particularly for sustaining as well as individual members. And if Mr. Devri is not a member, I request him to be a member of our association and have to share the values and share the benefits. And other listeners also they can be listening to me, and I request them and I appeal to them that they should become our member and involved in our activities. Now, what you can expect from ASM India chapter is, we are having the lecture of series, we are having the knowledge sharing base, we are having the interlinking, we are having the basically instant this thing means instant references authenticated by the community. So you can expect a lot of things from us, and we can also learn from you, and so that we can move it together. So we have other activities include material identity chapter. Then we have the failure analysis society, heat treatment society. They are all part of the society, so which you can be taking benefit of that. And we have basically very good library, which is having the acclaim handbooks, which we can refer in our library. Now, recently we have acquired a good place in Bhandu, Srishti Towers, where we will be having our office shifted within 2-3 months. So you can have the better environment and better facility. With this, I welcome you all for this today's evening lecture. And I request now Mr. Devre to take over. Mr. Devre, please.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Today I will be speaking on enable accreditation and introduction to the ISO 17025. First, I'll introduce what is NABL. Then it's basically a society registered
Amit,
earlier
request
under.
you to introduce yourself a little bit before
Yeah,
you
yeah,
come on to the
just,
topic.
just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, just a moment. Actually, that's my this thing, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. Anyways, so Mr. Amit Devre has studied in one of the India's premier institute, which is IIT Madras, and he has been metallurgy. He has passed out metallurgy from IIT Madras in 2007. Thereafter, he was in Micro Bosch and Tata Steel Jamshedpur. He worked as a plant head in one of the best heat treatment shops in Maharashtra, which is Avdut. Thereafter, now he's working with Volian Engineering Solutions for heat treatment and heat treatment allied businesses. So, being metallurgist and the vast experience of around 12 to 13 years in this field, uh, also with a lot of experience in metallurgical and metallurgical laboratory field. So I request Amit to go ahead with his session today. So this is one of the best session which we would like to. We would love that a lot of people take benefit of this. So over to Amit. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and doing it for us. Thank you. So welcome Amit to start the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the introduction. So today I'll be speaking about enable accreditation process and basic introduction to ISO 17025. So enable is a society. Earlier it was registered under the Department of Science and Technology with an objective to promote, implement, and maintain accreditation system for the laboratories. It was then transferred to the Department of Ministry of Commerce, and now currently, after 2017, it is under it has been merged with Quality Council of India. So enable undertakes following activities. It takes accreditation of testing laboratories and calibration laboratories as per ISO 17025, medical testing laboratories as per ISO 15189, proficiency testing as well as reference material producers. Enable maintains linkages with international bodies like ILAC and APAC, and these linkages with these international bodies, they help in acceptance of test or calibration results between the countries which are partners to mutual recognition agreement. So why enable accreditation is needed? It is needed firstly basically to have a third party assessment about how the laboratory working is going on, and it gives an authoritative recognition to that laboratory. Also, it helps customer to identify and select reliable laboratories which have this accreditation. It increases the customer's confidence in issues in reports issued by these laboratories. Also, if you are enable accredited laboratory, it helps in gaining business. Also, enable accredited laboratories are internationally recognized. The results are accepted worldwide. It also reduces the cost for retesting. As suppose a product is manufactured in India, and if it's been supplied to Europe, so if your testing is done at an enable accredited laboratory, then again there is no need of testing it to that exported country. So this is the representation of how the system is structured for enable accreditation. It can be a 4-tier system or 3-tier system, depends on the laboratory. Again, this is just a guideline. Laboratories can devise their own system, but basically the level 1 document is the quality manual. Second is the management system procedures or the work instructions, and then forms and formats for which the records are maintained. This is the enable accreditation flowchart. Firstly, you have to apply to the enable online. Once the application is being submitted to the enable, acknowledgement is received from enable, and the scrutiny of application is being done. After that, a lead auditor is assigned to that particular laboratory. the lead auditor undertakes adequacy report of the quality manual. If there are any corrective actions or NCs raised during this adequacy, it is being communicated to the laboratory. The laboratory has to revert back within a certain amount of time and address these non-conformities. Once these non-conformities are addressed, a pre-assessment is taken. During the pre-assessment is basically the lead auditor looks after, lead assessor looks after how the quality system is established. Are the resources required for running the laboratory activities as defined in the scope adequate? These things are looked after. If at all again during this pre-assessment any non-conformities are raised, they are again to be resolved by the laboratory within a certain time frame. And after the clearance of this non-conformities, a final assessment is taken by the team. This final assessment can vary from 2 days to more days depending on the size of the laboratory. Again, after final assessment, the NCRs raised during the assessment should be resolved within a time frame. After that, the scrutiny is done by the NABL and actions are recommended for accreditation. And after any approval by the NABL, the certificate is issued. Now I will talk about the basic standard ISO 17025, which is relevant to testing and calibration laboratories. So the basic requirement of this general requirement of this standard is, first is impartiality and confidentiality. So impartiality is the lack of prejudice or bias or conflict of interest. The laboratory has to identify these risks and they have to resolve or mitigate them on a daily ongoing basis. This risk to impartiality can arise from the laboratory activities, their personnel who are working in the laboratories, and their relationship with the customers. Second is confidentiality. The data generated by the laboratory during carrying out its activities, it should be confidential and it should not be shared with anyone unless it is agreed by the customer. Also, if it is required by the law that the results can be shared, only then it is allowed for the laboratory to share this information. But laboratory has to inform the customer during this process. These two are the foremost criteria for addressing the standard. Structural requirements. The laboratory should be a legal entity. It can be a proprietorship, a partnership, or a LLP, or a private limited firm, or a government body. Organization of that laboratory should be defined. It should have a organization chart. The roles and responsibilities of all the individuals working in the laboratory should be defined. Also, the type of facility, as in whether it's a permanent facility, as in the testing is carried out in-house, or whether site testing is carried out, it should be defined. Also, the range of activities, the scope according to which the testing is carried out should be defined. The scope basically includes the type of test carried out, uh, the standards against which these tests are carried out, the range is not just the range of the equipment, but also uh, the results should be validated within that range. And again, as Bonde sir mentioned, the uncertainty of measurement should be calculated for the overall scope. And finally, you should have a documented system, as shown earlier, a four tier or three tier system to ensure that the consistency and validity of the results. Resource requirements, personnel. The personnel should be competent. They should have basic qualification or experience and relevant training. Also, the person who is authorized to release the results or give the certificates, he should be competent. Any you can find the competency requirements for authorization results on the Enable website. Laboratories should have proper facilities and environment conditions to carry out the tests. These requirements should be documented and monitored while performing the activities. For example, during tensile testing in ASTM A370, the standard mentions that the test should be carried out at room temperature. If it's normal testing at within 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. So these conditions should be recorded while the test is being carried out. They should be documented, and if the temperature is not maintained within the range given in the standard, the laboratory should ensure that the temperature is maintained either by using AC or whatever. Equipment, availability of suitable equipment. The laboratory should have suitable equipment to carry out the test. It should be capable of achieving desired accuracy. The equipment should be calibrated, and intermediate checks should be conducted to assure the validity of calibration, and the records for the same should be maintained. Also, the laboratory should have a proper maintenance plan as for any equipment presented, and the history of the maintenance, and if any breakdowns are there, it should be recorded, and the machine should be validated after the maintenance has been carried out. And if those the results of validation are within the accepted criteria, then only the machine has to be put in the use. Metrological traceability. The results should be traceable to SI units. Either through a competent laboratory producer or by comparison to the international standards. Externally provided products and services. The laboratory should have a procedure for selecting, reviewing suppliers, and evaluation of the suppliers should be carried out on a regular basis. Clause 7 is a technical clause. It has many sub clauses. The first one is 7.1. It addresses about a review of request, tenders and contracts. So laboratory shall have a procedure for reviewing of request, tenders and contracts. The customer requirements should be defined, and laboratory should be capable of meeting those requirements. The example of this I would like to give is, suppose you are carrying out tensile testing. So according to your machine capability and as per standard, there are certain the test pitch should be of certain dimension. If the sample provided by the customer is too small and it cannot be accommodated in the machine, in the tensile testing machine, then in that case, the the requirement of this clause is not met, because before testing you should know whether this piece can be tested in our equipment. Do we have that capability, and also the environmental conditions under which the test should be carried out. If the laboratory is capable of meeting these requirements, then and only then the activity should be carried out. So this review has to be done by the laboratory. In case if there is any deviation from the standard, it should be informed to the customer. This contract review can be simplified for regular or internal customers. It need not be done on regular basis for regular customers. Selection, verification, and validation of methods. The laboratory should use appropriate and latest methods. These methods should be readily accessible to the personnel. Laboratory should select appropriate method whenever customer does not specify the standard against which the testing should be carried out. Methods should be verified and their records should be retained. Laboratory can also use non-standard or their own methods to carry out testing, but these methods should be developed by a competent personnel, and again the same should be validated. Sampling. Laboratory should have a procedure for sampling, which includes the sampling plan, how the sample preparation is being carried out, and from what locations and sites the samples are being selected. For commercial laboratories, when this clause is not applicable, because the samples are provided to them by the customer. Handling of test or calibration items. Again, laboratory should have a procedure for handling of test items. The sample should be identified throughout all the stages of laboratory activities, right from, suppose it is again a tensile or impact sample, right from the machining stage until the final testing is completed. Each and every sample should be uniquely identified through all the stages. Also, the storage of samples should be, the environmental conditions for storage should be recorded, and those conditions should be maintained. Technical records. Technical records are basically observations during the test or calibration. These records are to be retained, and if any amendment is being carried out to these records, the amendment should be traceable back to the original observations. Evaluation of measurement uncertainty. Calibration laboratory shall evaluate uncertainty for all calibrations, including its own. For testing laboratory, the uncertainty should be calculated according to a particular for each and every test method. but it's not mandatory to determine uncertainty for each and every test conducted. Evaluation of uncertainties uh, is carried out by these two types, type A and type B. Type A is basically uh, you calculate the standard deviation of a test carried out multiple times on a particular sample. Uh, this is the type A uncertainty. In type B uncertainty is based on the previous measurement data, the experience of behavior and properties of materials, manufacturer specifications, or the data provided in calibration certificates, textbooks. Type B uncertainty is a function of it's basically a function of probability distribution. This probability distribution can be a normal or a binomial. Uh, Again, uh, it's left after the judgment of the person who has experience in this in the test methods. Ensuring validity of results. Laboratory should have procedure for monitoring of validity of results. This is basically a clause related to the quality control. So monitoring can be done by use of reference materials, intermediate tests, retest. Retest is basically again checking the same sample again and again at certain intervals of time to ensure that the results generated by the laboratory are valid. Replica test. Replica test is basically, suppose, for example, you are conducting a tensile test. Again, tensile strength can be also derived from based on the hardness of the material. So this is an example of replica test. Interlaboratory comparisons. You send out the samples to different enable accredited laboratories and statistically analyze the results generated by them and your own laboratory and compare these results. Proficiency testing. Proficiency testing is in similar to uh, interlaboratory comparison, but in this case, in case of proficiency testing, there is a nodal laboratory which sends out the samples to other laboratories and they compile the results. The results from this should be analyzed to improve the laboratory activities. And whenever this data is outside the predefined criteria, and corrective action shall be taken before reporting of results. Reporting of results. The results should be reviewed and authorized by a competent personnel. The report shall consist the test method or calibration method used, the environmental conditions, sampling, if at all it has been carried out, the date of test or calibration, and uncertainty. Uncertainty is mandatory for calibration report. Even testing laboratories can also specify, but it's not mandatory. Whenever the statement of conformity is being given in the report, it should clearly specify against which standard the material conforms. The reports can be presented either in a soft copy or hard copy. as long as the requirements of ISO 17025 are met. Amendments to the reports shall again be communicated to the customer along with the reason for the amendment. Complaint. Laboratory shall have a process for handling the complaints, and this process shall be made available to any interested party based on the request. The process shall include validation, investigation, and actions taken to resolve the complaint. The outcome of this investigation shall be made by an individual who was not involved in the original laboratory activity. A formal notice should be given to the complainant at the end of handling of complaint. As in, whenever the complaint is resolved, it should be communicated to the customer that the complaint has been resolved, and what all preventive actions or corrective actions are taken, the same should also be communicated to the customer. Non-conforming work. Laboratory shall have a procedure for addressing the non-conforming work. The responsibility and authority of managing this non-conforming work should be defined. The impact on previous work should also be looked upon. Whenever there is an NC, it should be the significance of that NC should be verified, validated, and if it's a serious consequence, then the work should be recalled. All the records of non-conforming work shall be retained by the laboratory. Control of data and information management system. Laboratory shall have access to data and information to perform its activity. Laboratory information management software or LIMS shall be validated for all the active functions across the laboratory. Generally in market, commercial softwares are available for this, and if they are within the designed application range, it can be considered that these softwares are validated. Again, there should be protection for unauthorized access to the software. Whenever data transfer or calculations are undertaken by the software, it should be checked periodically and in a systematic manner. If the software is provided by an external source, the requirements of the standard should be maintained, as in the requirements of clause 6.3 should be met. Management requirements. There are two options in this. If a laboratory already has an established system according to ISO 9001, then the requirements of clause 8 are considered to be met. If the laboratory doesn't have ISO 9001, then I'll show in the next clauses how the requirement should be met. Management system documentation. The laboratories shall have policies and objectives. These policies should be established, documented, and maintained. Should be accessible to all the personnel, relevant lab personnel. The policies should address competence, impartiality, and consistent operation of laboratory. All the documentation shall be in a referenced form and linked to the management system. As in, the quality manual should include a reference to the work instructions and procedures. Those work instructions and procedures should in turn have reference to the forms and formats needed for maintaining the records. Uh, Control of management system documents. Uh, these documents should be reviewed, approved, and uniquely identified along with the revisions. This should be easily available to the laboratory personnel, and obsolete, unintended use of obsolete documents should be prevented. Control of records. The laboratory has to retain these records for a specified duration. The duration can be decided by the laboratory. It's in their purview as to how long they can retain the records. But generally, 1 year is minimum period. There should be proper control for identification, retention, storage, retrieval, and disposal of the records. Laboratory shall plan actions to address risks and opportunities which are identified in its laboratory activities. These actions and shall be implemented, and again, effectiveness of these actions shall be evaluated. The options to address risk can include identified and avoiding threats, eliminating the risk, or changing the likelihood of the risk, or retaining the risk by informed decision. As such, there is no requirement for formal risk management procedure, which is required by ISO 9001 and IATF. Improvement. Laboratory shall identify the opportunities for improvement and implement them. These opportunities for improvement can be identified during internal audits, management reviews, through the review of its procedures and documents, risk assessment, and during ILC, interlaboratory comparisons, or proficiency testing. Customer feedback shall be sought to improve the laboratory management system and its activities. This can be done either through customer satisfaction surveys, or communication with the customers, or reviewing the reports with the customers. Corrective actions. The laboratory shall address non-conformity and evaluate and implement corrective actions. The effectiveness of these corrective actions shall be verified by competent personnel. And the laboratory should retain a record of these corrective actions, and if necessary, the changes should be made to the management system while addressing the non-conformities. Internal audits. Laboratory should carry out internal audits at a regular interval by a competent personnel. Enable requires at least one person from a laboratory should undergo 4-day training as an internal quality auditor. This is the mandatory requirement for any laboratory which needs to undergo enable accreditation. the audit scope and criteria shall be defined. And the non-conformities and corrective actions arising during this audit should be communicated with the top management. Management review. Management reviews shall be conducted at regular intervals as per the agenda which is mentioned in the standard. The records for this shall be retained. I've finished with my uh, topic. This is my company profile. They're basically into heat treatment, plant setup, metallurgical consultancy, auto metallurgy. Also, we have a metallurgical laboratory in Vasai region. Thank you. Thank you for your time, everyone. If you have any questions or suggestions, please, they're most welcome.
So thank you, Amit. If you can switch on your camera, please.
Yeah.
This is Sandeep. Yeah. So that people would love to see you. Yes. So yeah, Amit. So yes, yes. So you're quite visible now. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time for giving this requirements of NABL accreditation and about the introduction to ISO IEC 1700 17025 2020 2017. And thank you very much for giving it in very details, like requirements, roles and responsibilities of working in lab, type of facilities, site testing or in-house, whether the scope of the activities, how this how the range to be within the range, then how the validation of the range can be done, what are the resource requirements, and the detailing of all the clauses which we have done. So thank you very much for all this. I think there are many people, there are a lot of participants here. Today the number is around 55 now, and to the participants also it was very overwhelming response, I would say. And this is the third of such lecture which we have started, series of lectures on heat treatment and allied services. So next two sessions will be on one on cost optimization, and second could be on uh, global automotive heat treatment. So we'll be doing it on next two Saturdays. So I would like a lot of people to participate and take benefit of these lectures, which are free for all of you. So now over to all the participants to shoot the questions. Before that, I have one question, Amit.
Yes, sir.
For failure analysis,
Okay.
do you have anything in NABL accreditation?
There's no particular as such. Uh,
Any requirement, anything in particular that
no,
because
so again,
failure analysis is such a topic. Yeah.
the failing analysis, sir, as in
Yeah,
it
Amit, please go
various
ahead.
different activities. Like you start from the chemical composition, its microstructure, hardness, tensile strength, corrosion, and it basically covers most of the metallurgical testing. So there is no specific as such uh, clause or for an enable for failure analysis. But if you conduct failure analysis, suppose your laboratory is accredited for chemical testing and tensile testing. If these two activities are in your scope, and uh, during your failure analysis, you arrived at a conclusion uh, by conducting only these two tests, then of course, as in if these two tests are in your scope, then of course you can report the results as in the results are taken care under enable accreditation or as per ISO 17025.
Okay, thank you, Amit. So the floor is open to all the participants. So, I
Yeah, I would
request
like
all
to
of
ask a
them to have.
question. Hi,
Please
can you hear
identify
me?
yourself.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
could you please
Lukman.
identify yourself?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Go ahead,
I,
Lukman sir.
yeah, I'm Lukman and I work with KG Somai College of Engineering. Actually, we had this thing in our mind that to go for NABL accreditation for maybe one or two labs. Now, is that sort of thing possible? Because a lab and a separate entity, it's two different things, and the what do you call the hierarchy? We may think of having someone attached to becoming an auditor, an internal auditor, or something of that sort. But then, can you suggest? Is it possible for me to say, suppose, look at say a metallurgy lab and a slender materials lab to go for NABL accreditation? Is it something that you see pretty often, or is it something that people do?
Yeah, you can go for unlimited accreditation for your labs. As in, the lab can be a part of a bigger organization, or it can
Mhm.
be on its own. So that is not an issue.
So,
Even
in
if
terms
it's
of the fees, the procedure remains the same, or
yeah,
is it
procedure is the same.
okay? Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to ask. I'm Manral, S.F. Manral.
Hello, sir.
Actually, yeah, I was working in iShare actually. I worked for around 37, 38 years and I'm retired. So I'm doing my freelance consultancy. I just wanted to know what is the time generally required in order to get the NABL accreditation certificate, and what is the charges? I mean, the fee is involved in this.
Time period again depends on the scope, as in how big or small the laboratory is, the activities carried by the laboratories. But generally, it ranges, in my experience, somewhere around 6 to 8 months, 12 months maybe.
Okay. And what are the charges involved? Generally, how much?
Charges are as per the different disciplines. On the NABL website, you can check it out. There are 9 to 10 disciplines: chemical, biological, mechanical, metallography, thermal, electrical. So the number of disciplines, more the number of disciplines, the fees according to the number of disciplines. It
And
is
what is the, I mean,
around
per
some per
discipline?
discipline. It is around, I think, 11 or 12,000.
Okay.
11 to 12,000 per discipline.
Okay, as in the previous, I mean, somebody asked me about this failure analysis NABL accreditations.
Yeah.
So the question I think which I would like to rephrase it. Basically, suppose a lab was an NABL accredited lab and involved in the general material testing or metallurgical testings.
Okay.
So if he does any failure analysis and he gets a job and where it is asked to do the failure analysis, so the report which he releases as a failure analysis report, will it be under the NABL accreditation scope or it will be out of that scope?
The test carried out for conducting those failure analysis, those are under NABL accreditation scope.
No, but the inference, the root cause analysis, or the recommendations, which generally has to be given at the end of after the testing. See, testing is the initial part.
Yeah.
Now,
But the
after
inference part, yeah.
After collecting the initial data,
Hmm.
you have to make the hypothesis how the failure could have happened, and after that you have to form with hypothesis and then give the recommendations and find out the root cause and give the recommendation. This is what is to be done. Because generally somebody would be interested in how it has failed and what need to be done to prevent the failure. So the recommendation or this thing which the lab will give. So that is the point. I mean, will that be NABL accreditation scope or not?
that can can be under enable scope. Again, as we reported in clause 7.8, the against what standards or what logic you are based on what logic you are in standard or logic you are interpreting those results. If that is clear, then obviously it comes under the this thing anyway scope.
Because actually, I have spent around 15-20 years in the failure analysis. I was looking at the warranty, so I'm involved in that. So it's a bit tricky actually to collect all the required informations and then put it into this and then implement. So it involves a lot of time, lot of study, lot of understanding of the function of that machine or the part. And then one can do. So beyond, I mean, only the simple testing. So that's why I'm asking.
So I couldn't get you, sir. What was the last line you said?
So basically, what I was saying, the failure analysis, I mean the hypothesis making and ground truth analysis and recommendations, it's beyond basically the testing. One need to have the thorough knowledge of the part working or the machines which with whose we are doing the analysis. I mean the functioning of that part. So after that only one can, I mean, actually do the actual root cause analysis and do the recommendation. So it is beyond that only simple testing. That's why I'm asking, will it be coming under that scope or not? This was the point. That's all.
Yeah, obviously it's
whatever fees you said around 11,000, these are for the year or for the factor this thing, or how is it?
for single certifications for 3 years.
Certification for 3 years. Okay,
Yeah.
11,000 will be for 3 years, and then that's how it is.
Yeah, that is and again per discipline.
Yeah, of course, per discipline you said it. Okay. So any more questions?
Yeah, Milind, thanks for delivering
Amit,
this session.
Amit, Suresh is Amit Devre.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Amit, for delivering this very informative session on NABL accreditation. I know it's a very vast topic. So I just want to know from you that can you please share maybe some common mistakes which are being generally incurred during destructive testing, hardness testing or UTM testing?
Okay.
Which in your experience, which are some common mistakes which have a direct bearing on the accuracy of result? So maybe we can learn from those common mistakes and we will avoid those mistakes.
For tensile testing, sample preparation should be as per standard. For generally the radius is not maintained as per the standard. This is what I have observed.
Okay.
In tensile testing. Also, the use of extensometer. Some the materials which have exhibit yield point phenomena, you can calculate the yield stress from the graph.
Correct.
But for materials which don't exhibit this phenomena, it's difficult to calculate the yield stress. So for that you require to use extensometer.
Very right, very right. Okay. And with hardness testing, any such common, can you please share?
Hardness testing, if you are checking cylindrical samples, the correction factor should be accounted for.
Exactly, right. For convex and concave, right?
Yeah.
Right. And also means this is my observation that sometimes just I want to add one point that sometimes people are doing some master block verification in hardness testing, but they are not following any standard. Generally, there is an assumption that plus minus 1 HRC is okay for hardness testing, but as per if you refer some standards, so as per the hardness range, this error and repeatability is defined. So I think that is also one point that
Yeah.
one should do any testing with respect to some reference standard, right? And
Yeah.
not an assumption, standard assumption.
Your hardness testing method should be validated. During validation, so you would suppose you take 3 readings of the master block. The average of those 3 readings should be, and the deviation, standard deviation, and the average of these 3 readings should be as per your predefined criteria. If these readings are the deviation or the mean value is outside the criteria, obviously there is something wrong with your method.
Okay.
One more question I want to ask.
Thanks for the answer.
Suppose you have a commercial lab and who is doing the job for the general people. Is there any cap on the charges one NABL lab can get or can charge from the people? Is there any for different testing? Is there any norms fixed for NABL lab, or it is left with discussion of the NABL lab?
Charging to the customer? Are you asking about the charges which lab levies on the customer?
Yeah.
No, sir. There is no this thing. It's a purely commercial decision of the laboratory. They can charge anything.
Open thing. 5-star service, 3-star service, no service. That depends on that. Mr. Amit, compliments to you for revising our 17025. I understand there are a lot of lead auditors in the audience. For example, Pandya, Mr. Pandya, Dr. Rajkumar, these are your auditors for the NABL also.
Yes,
and I want to add one more thing. NABL is not the only accreditation body in India. There are another 2 bodies, accreditation bodies in India also now. So laboratories have the choice selecting the accreditation body. Even A2LA accreditation also you can, American Society of this thing you can also get in India. So there are a lot of things now coming up, and it is market is opening to that. But thank you very much, Mr. Amit. I think you were with the Unique Laboratory in Baroda, na?
Yes, sir.
Along with Makwana?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
Do you
sir,
remember
sure,
me? You were the auditor there, na? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So any more questions?
No, looks like.
Sir,
No, just a moment. There are a few. Yeah.
Hello?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Good evening. This is Kuldeep Sharma from Surat. Just one thing I wanted to ask you regarding this recent changes in NABL requirements for 17025 regarding example. For example, NABL 133, there is a document. Amit, are you aware of that?
Yeah.
So actually, recently what I understood that NABL has said that all reports should be issued under NABL symbol, for which we have a scope of accreditation. So can you explain what is the logic for that? Suppose sometimes customers do not ask for NABL symbol on the reports.
Okay.
But based on this NABL guideline, now we are expected to issue all reports under NABL symbol. So what may be the background of this?
I don't know the background, but if the range of the results which I have reported, if it falls under your scope, then why not present with an NABL symbol?
That is right, but just in case, if customer is this thing requirement is not there or something like that.
I am not aware of what is the background behind this decision. Sorry.
Okay, no issues. Thank you.
This is basically to avoid the misuse of the enabled symbol. You are not supposed to report non-enabled report on, results on the enabled logo.
No, my question is the opposite, other way around. When we have the
So then
we have the scope.
But
The scope,
the first place,
Bonde sir, the
first place, why-
question is that the scope is there, but the customer wants a report without enable logo. So
yeah, the question was, I'm saying, why would anybody
without
would like
enable
to have
logo, you
a
can
report
expose it.
without NABL logo?
yeah, that's what.
But that situation may be very rare. I don't think anybody will ask you that.
Yeah,
That situation is
everybody would
otherwise.
like
People
to-
are crazy for the
every-
enable logo.
Everybody would like to have a report with the NABL logo so that it gives the authenticity of
Yeah,
the lab
obviously.
and of the result test result. Why would anybody would need that? That's the
Yeah,
point.
that's what.
So only
Sometimes
Sandeep
sometimes
can,
customers do not specifically ask for it. So in that case, it does the requirement is not there. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, Kuldeep, from which industry, sir?
I'm from Hazira, L&T Hazira.
Okay, nice to listen to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
NABL,
Yeah.
but I understand NABL symbol is a quite prestigious and authentic or respected symbol. So if it is there on the report, it is always be a good sign, good this thing.
Okay, yes, understood.
So Amit, in the case where this symbol is not there, how one can know that this is NABL, means the scope was under NABL? Any hint or any guideline for that while looking at the report?
Report as in
Suresh,
enable, if the results are outside the scope, the laboratory should clearly mention that certain, for example, in case of chemical testing, suppose laboratory doesn't have nitrogen under its scope, then it should clearly mention that the nitrogen it's not in its scope. And you can check the scope on Enable website for each and every accredited laboratory. You can go on Enable website and check its scope.
Okay, so the information available on
Yeah.
the NABL website. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Good.
yeah, Amit, there is one question from person name is MATLAB SDF. I really fail to understand. Anyways, the question is, sir, in tensile, how much load speed we should maintain while testing?
Depends on the sample size. The load capacity depends on the sample size.
No, load speed he is talking of. So any general guidelines?
IS 160. Yes,
I
Surya, for
think
IS
it-
160.
IS 160.
Generally, it is 5 mm per minute. Suresh Kanoje here. Generally, that is what. we can
Suresh
follow.
Kanoje from?
Strain rate.
John Deere.
Thank you, Suresh.
Yeah, I think it is already in the standard. I mean, about the speed and I think.
Yeah,
it's
strain
already-
rate is mentioned in the
I
standard.
don't remember that standard number, but it is there. I have read it somewhere.
Yeah, ASTM E8 maybe they might have it. ASTM E8 or UTM.
But the speed does matter.
Standard
Speed
is
does
ISO
matter.
6892.
Yeah, ISO wise it may be 6892. Yeah, speed does matter, exactly. Strain hardening rate is very important.
Any more questions?
Yes, Amit, I want to one question. See, the laboratory, it is related to the site calibration agency. So suppose that agency doesn't have the scope. So
Okay.
whether they can outsource? Outsource means we can hire the another laboratory which is having the facility. So our laboratory can outsource the other agency.
Yeah, you can outsource, but the report will be issued under that laboratory and not
With
yours.
the permission of the client. The permission of the client.
Yeah, obviously you have to inform the customer, but the report will be and if you need an enable report, the outsourced party which is conducting the calibration, they can provide the report and not you.
Hello, Amit.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for very informative session. I'm Prasad Phade from ARAI.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question related to the decision rule. There is mention in 2017 about the decision rule. It should be predefined before the contract at the contract stage itself. So can you throw some more light on this decision rule, how it is defined, and what is the background of this decision rule clause?
Decision rule is based on the uncertainty range that you have. So if your results fall within the range of your testing, and if again they are well within the range of your testing, then you can comment on the conformity. But if it comes in the border range, as in between the lower limit and hello.
No, you go ahead, please.
Yeah. The tricky part is when the results are on the border side, between as in near to the lower range or the upper lane, minus the measurement uncertainty. But it's basically dependent on the range of testing and your measurement uncertainty for that range.
Hello.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Sir, I am Venkatesh.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir. I have one question. Sir.
From?
I am from. Actually, I am in Sir JTech India, Gurgaon. Sir, I have one question. Sir, during hardness testing in the Rockwell hardness tester, sir, we have used three, like one upper hardness testing meter, and one is lower, and one is medium hardness testing. Like one is 25 HRC, and another is 45 HRC, and another is 60 HRC, right?
Okay.
So yes, sir. But we have maintained like up to the difference between these three hardness master block is 0.8, right? So whenever we have during mastering, whenever we have checked first three, we have take five indentation. First two is neglected, and next three will be take the average of this. And that average value, if we get the inspection of the part or any material, so that any deviate part on any deviate inspection value, we will add in that inspection sheet or not, sir?
Yeah, you can add or subtract those values. You can adjust for the bias. The bias should be recorded and justified.
Because sir, 0.8 will be allowable, and according to the sir, we will add in that inspection sheet. But if we will subtract that, so will there any issue or any
Again,
problem?
Depends whether the bias is on the plus side or the minus side. Accordingly, you have to either add it or subtract it.
Okay, sir.
So, if there are no more questions, So if there are no more questions, we will end the session here. Thank you very much, Mr. Amit Devre, and also to participants who have heard you for 1 hour relentlessly, and they have also interacted with their knowledge and sharing their knowledge, asking questions, and helping the community in all. So thank you very much, Amit, and thank you very much all the participants. Keep listening to our sessions on every Saturday, 7:30. We all be here, ASM India ASM International India chapter. Thanks.
Sir, sir, what is the next program? On what topic?
Next program could be one on cost optimization in heat treatment shop, and second could be international global heat treatment shop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you,
declare
Mr.
it soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
We'll declare it on Monday so that you can see that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much, Amit.
Thank you.
Thank you, organization
Thank you all
committee.
very
Thank you.
much. Ending the session now.